The time by Caracas is 6 p.m. and this is CBX Business News. The business news headlines are brought to you by QMax Wealth Management, making more possible. Intellectual property growth, TNT growth slows, and Japan's factories under pressure. Good evening and welcome to CBX Business News for Tuesday, May 19, 2026. I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, Jamaica moves to expand its intellectual property growth through a new partnership with the World Intellectual Property Organization. Also ahead, the International Monetary Fund warns Trinidad and Tobago's economic growth is expected to slow as debt and energy sector pressures build. And later, Japan's industrial output falls for a second consecutive month, signaling continued weakness in manufacturing activity. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now. Yeah, yeah. It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now. Yeah, yeah. It's feeling so good right now. Don't ever, ever, ever wanna calm down. Oh, no, no.
We get the big contract. 50,000 units a month for 3 years. Great. Won't need help.
If you are a business owner that requires capital for the expansion of your business, talk to a registered broker today to find out more about listing your company on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, an efficient alternative to other financing options.
Thank God for the Jamaica Stock Exchange junior market.
The Jamaica Stock Exchange, providing a fair, efficient, and transparent stock market.
The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with Jamaica positioning intellectual property as a major business and investment driver. Jamaica is moving to transform intellectual property into a stronger engine for investment and economic growth through a landmark agreement with the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, to modernize the country's intellectual property framework. On Monday, Industry Minister Senator Aubin Hill and WIPO Director General Darren Tang signed a letter of intent to establish an intellectual property training institution in Jamaica under the WIPO Academy's global program. Hill says the initiative forms part of efforts to revamp Jamaica's intellectual property policy and position the country as a regional center for innovation and intellectual property services.
He has shown that intellectual property is not just about having a document, not just for big companies like Grace and Resinco and others like them, but it's for especially for people who are creating and innovating at the lower levels, because that's where the ideas are bubbling up. And the World Intellectual Property Organization and the Jamaica Intellectual Property Organization, we want to make sure that we capture these innovations, give them the title to their products, and the services that they're creating, and make sure that they're properly protected so that they can sell their innovations to bigger companies in Jamaica and outside of Jamaica, and create products that people are willing to pay good money for, because value is in what they're creating.
That was Jamaica's Industry Minister, Senator Orbin Hill. Meanwhile, WIPO Director General Darren Tang says the organization is looking to help Jamaica transform intellectual property into a stronger driver of jobs, investment, and economic growth.
Jamaica has got one of the strongest national brands in the world. Just talking to the minister about Jamaica being the country that created cuisine like jerk chicken, music like ska, dancehall, and reggae, and also incredible sports people like Usain Bolt and many Asafa Power and many others. But I think intellectual property has been seen as something that is only connected to those who are experts and technicians. And I think what we want to do is that to bring IP in Jamaica to the ground, to support your amazing creators, your sports persons, your innovators, to really use intellectual property to be able to be successful and to help IP be a catalyst to create jobs, attract investments, garner prosperity, not just for Jamaica, but for the whole region in the Caribbean and beyond.
That was WIPO Director General Darren Tang. A new governance controversy is unfolding around the National Disaster Fund after findings from the Auditor General's report revealed significant gaps in financial accountability and statutory oversight. Speaking during a press conference Monday, Opposition Deputy Spokesperson on Productivity, Efficiency and Competitiveness, Senator Cleveland Tomlinson, says the report found the fund was holding over 160 million Jamaican dollars in bank balances and more than $200 million in investments as at February this year.
The Auditor General's report found that there were clear breaches of compliance with respect to the National Disaster Fund. It says the National Disaster Fund held $163 million in its bank account and $203 million in investments as at February 2026. That is a substantial portion of public resources outside of the proper statutory oversight. In fact, the Auditor General identified 3 material areas of non-compliance with the Disaster Risk Management Act. The NDF has not been audited as a standalone fund for 5 consecutive years. And there were no annual reports and no statements of account presented. And there wasn't a dedicated bank account to maintain the funds directed from donations for the purposes of relief distribution and recovery.
Tomlinson says the findings also expose deeper institutional weaknesses in how emergency financing is managed.
This is clearly problematic. You know, when I think of the amount of mismanagement, the degree of the governance failure, particularly the amount of monies that were left unspent, the question that I think we should ask ourselves is, if the monies were not directed towards relief efforts, what were they being left unspent for? But more importantly, I think we should ask, who were the monies being left unspent for? And when you ask those questions, I want you to think of the history of a litany of Auditor General's report that have pointed to misappropriation of funds, mismanagement, questionable acts regarding financial reserve statements of account for auditing.
That was Opposition Deputy Spokesperson on Productivity, Efficiency and Competitiveness, Senator Cleveland Tomlinson. Jamaica's real estate market is seeing renewed momentum, driven by rising demand for housing developments, tourism-linked properties, and growing interest from overseas Jamaicans seeking long-term investment opportunities on the island. The Jamaica National Group says more members of the diaspora are exploring opportunities to purchase land, invest in commercial property, and secure mortgages in Jamaica as part of broader wealth building and retirement planning strategies. The group says interest has also increased in areas such as property management, family land ownership, and legal support surrounding property transactions, particularly among Jamaicans living in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Industry stakeholders say the trend highlights the growing role of diaspora capital in Jamaica's real estate and construction sectors, as overseas investors continue looking to the island for both residential and commercial opportunities. In financial news, Epley Limited is reporting a stronger financial performance for 2025, driven by higher rental income, property revaluation gains, and growth across its investment portfolio. According to the company's audited financial statements, net profit rose to 1.7 billion Jamaican dollars for the year ended December 2025, up from 1.48 billion dollars in 2024. Total comprehensive income also increased to 1.88 billion dollars. The investment company says gross investment income climbed more than 60% to $1.48 billion, supported by stronger net rental income, higher asset management fees, and increased operating lease income. Epley also recorded more than $635 million in fair value gains on investment properties, while its share of profits from associated companies and joint ventures totaled $429 million. The group's total assets rose to $22.7 billion at the end of the financial year, with investment properties accounting for more than $9 billion of the portfolio. Meanwhile, earnings per stock unit declined to $3.89 when compared with $4.74 in the prior year. Epley says it continues to expand its regional real estate and investment operations through its Caribbean property funds and credit financing businesses. We move to the latest updates from the JSE Equities. In Tuesday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 114 stocks, of which 51 advanced, 40 declined, and 23 traded firm. Leading the winners are Iron Rock Insurance Company, Omni Industries, Berger Paints Jamaica, and Kintyre Holdings JA, while leading the losers are Express Catering, Productive Business Solution USD Ordinary Shares, Main Event Entertainment Group, and Sagicor Real Estate X. The main index advanced by 1,691.13 points to close at 349,193.18 points. The junior market index, however, declined by 41.58 points to close at 3,068.12 points. It's time for the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. In today's Market Education feature, we're defining the term Automated Clearinghouse, or ACH. The ACH is an electronic payment network that allows funds to be transferred between financial institutions. It supports transactions such as direct payroll deposits, tax refunds, bill payments, and debit transfers. The network processes billions of transactions each year in both domestic and international markets. By connecting banks and businesses electronically, ACH helps make financial transactions more secure, reliable, and efficient. That was the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next. The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances tease the senses and pulse investments.
This project marks the celebration of our 30th Hall of Fame and aims to highlight the achievements, challenges, and invaluable lessons of those who have shaped and are shaping the future of our economy. Our aim is to celebrate the voices and stories of 30 remarkable leaders in Jamaica's private sector. Join us as we explore these narratives of resilience, leadership, and vision.
Mikey, is what sweet you saw?
Yeah, dear babes. Where's the catty? Me and you go party tonight.
Party? You secure your future yet? Careless.
Did you know that over time the stock market has provided a reliably high return on investments? Be sure to contact a licensed stockbroker for more information on this exciting investment opportunity.
Taking care of business, Mikey?
Yeah, catty. I'm securing my future. Want to come look over my stock portfolio?
The Jamaica Stock Exchange, providing a fair, efficient, and transparent stock market.
Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, says Trinidad and Tobago's economic recovery remains fragile as weakness in the energy sector continues to drag on growth. In its latest Article 4 consultation, the IMF says the Twin Island economy is projected to expand by just 0.8% in 2026, while fiscal and energy-related pressures remain elevated. The fund also notes non-energy sector activity remained resilient last year, but persistent fiscal deficits and weak energy output continue to weigh on the economy. In the meantime, the fund estimates Trinidad and Tobago's fiscal deficit reached 4.7% of GDP in fiscal year 2025. Public debt is projected to climb to nearly 90% of GDP this year, while inflation is expected to rise temporarily to about 3.1%. The Washington-based institution also warns that delays in major energy projects and declining output from mature oil and gas fields remain key risks to the outlook. It also says global geopolitical tensions, including conflict in the Middle East, could further impact energy prices and economic stability. Despite those challenges, the IMF notes that international reserves remain adequate at about $5.4 billion, equivalent to 5.5 months of import cover. At the same time, the fund says stronger fiscal reforms, greater exchange rate flexibility, and more investment in non-energy industries will be critical to improving long-term economic resilience. Meanwhile, the Cayman Islands is deepening its financial links with Asia as Japanese investments tied to Cayman structures surge past $800 billion. Figures from Japan's Ministry of Finance show Japanese portfolio assets linked to the Cayman Islands rose to about $811 billion by the end of 2024, up from $761 billion a year earlier. Much of the growth came from investment fund activity, with the Japanese holdings of Cayman Investment Fund shares rising to $638 billion from $590.3 billion in 2023. That data reveals that Cayman Islands is now second only to the United States as a destination for Japanese portfolio investment. The territory also accounted for more than 62% of Japan's overseas investment fund holdings last year. The figures come as Premier Andre Ebanks recently led a financial services delegation to East Asia, including stops in Tokyo, Hong Kong, and mainland China. Officials say the mission formed part of a broader effort to attract greater portfolio investment from Asia. The Cayman Islands says growing Japanese demand for overseas and alternative investments continues to drive expansion of Cayman-based financial structures. And in corporate news, the Point Lisas Industrial Port Development Corporation, PLIP-DECO, is reporting a 10% increase in profit for the first quarter of 2026 as stronger property gains helped lift profits. The Trinidad-based port operator posted profit after tax of $47.3 million, up from $43.9 million a year earlier. Revenue, however, edged lower to $103.3 million. Gross profit also declined slightly, while operating profit improved to $56.4 million. The company says investment property gains continued to support earnings, with fair value gains reaching about $32.6 million during the quarter. At the same time, port operations remain the group's largest revenue driver, generating TT $76.6 million, while estate operations contributed $26.2 million. Meanwhile, total assets rose to 3.66 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars at the end of March, while cash reserves also increased during the period. It's now time for news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 27 securities, of which 12 advanced, 3 declined, and 12 traded firm. Today's winners are Point Lisas Industrial Port Development Corporation, Grace Kennedy, NCB Financial Group, and Unilever Caribbean, while leading the losers are JMMB Group, LJ Williams B, and Trinidad and Tobago NGL. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All TNT Index advanced by 4.37 points to close at 1,421.84. The Composite Index also advanced, but by 5.21 points to close at 992.50. The Cross-Listed Index gained 0.86 points to close at 74.63, while the SME Index remained at 81.70. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next. Welcome back. In international news, the World Health Organization, WHO, says it is accelerating the global rollout of digital health systems as governments increase investments in electronic medical records, health data infrastructure, and digital patient services. Addressing delegates at the 79th World Health Assembly on Monday, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom warned that major gaps in mortality and disease reporting continue to undermine public health planning, healthcare financing, and investment decisions worldwide.
Of the estimated 61 million deaths that occurred globally in 2023, fewer than 1 in 5 were reported to WHO with sufficient cause of death information for reliable public health analysis.
He says strengthening health data systems has become increasingly critical as governments and healthcare providers rely more heavily on real-time analytics that guide policy and spending decisions.
Strengthening health data systems is vital to enable countries to generate and use their own data to guide public health action. In the past 12 months, WHO expanded the global digital health certification network to 82 countries, enabling 2 billion people to access their health records on national digital health wallets. And I would like to thank EU for the great support to this new department we have in digital health.
That was WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom. And in Asia, geopolitical disruptions are also beginning to weigh on industrial production activity. Japan's industrial production declined by 0.4% month-over-month in March 2026, extending declines for a second consecutive month as Middle East-related disruptions continued affecting manufacturing activity. Production fell sharply in inorganic and organic chemicals by 8.6%, while general purpose and business-oriented machinery declined 4.3%. Petroleum and coal products also dropped 7.7%. Some sectors, however, recorded gains, including transport equipment, excluding motor vehicles, which rose 13.4%, while production machinery increased 1.4% and electronic parts and devices climbed 1.7%. On an annual basis, industrial production increased 2.4% from a year earlier, accelerating from 0.4% growth in February and marking the strongest yearly expansion since June 2025. Meanwhile, food inflation trends across the Southeast Asia are continuing to show signs of moderation despite persistent price pressures in several categories. Food prices in Malaysia increased 1.2% year-over-year in April 2026, slightly above the 1.1% increase recorded in March, which had marked the slowest pace of food inflation in 6 years. Prices continued rising across several categories, including meat at 0.6%, fish and seafood at 1.2%, fruits and nuts at 1.8%, and food away from home, which climbed 2.6%. At the same time, oils and fats rose 0.1%, while cereals and cereal products increased 0.2%, returning to positive growth territory. Meanwhile, food at home prices were unchanged compared with a year earlier, following a slight increase in March. Prices remained subdued for milk, dairy products and eggs, which declined 0.9%, while vegetable prices fell 4.7%. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
Has so much book you need for high school?
I'll show you how to make sure you have all the money for my books and even some extra. It's called budgeting, Dad. Making a budget is the most important thing you can do to track your money. It keeps a record of how much you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, and most importantly, how much you can save. Write down all your income, write down all your expenses, see where you can cut down and allot more money to more important things, like saving.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, Jamaica targets intellectual property growth through new WIPO partnership. Regionally, IMF warns TNT growth to slow amid rising debt pressures. And internationally, Japan's industrial output falls for second straight month. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.
Hi, I'm Horace Hines, Managing Director,